Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of CrowCast Tuesday Night Live. Massive fortnight, not only in football world, but in the world in general. And joining me to talk all about the footy stuff is Macca. How you going, Mac?
Oh, I'm going to be firing on all four cylinders, maybe 6 or 8 tonight.
Mate, I thought you were an 8-cylinder machine. How you going?
Yeah, no, actually travelling very well at the minute, so looking forward to tonight. We've got plenty to talk.
Yeah, we certainly do. It's been a big week, big fortnight, I should say, in football terms. And unfortunately, Nikki can't join us tonight. She's not feeling well, and Donkey may or may not jump in at some stage. But I'm sure we'll be able to keep the motor running, mate, for the duration, don't you reckon?
Yeah, well, I said off air, you and I we can talk underwater with a mouthful of marble.
Yes.
We'll just keep going.
G'day to everyone who's joined us on Discord and on our other chat mediums on YouTube and Facebook. Of course, if you want to chat along with the boys on Discord, you can join our Discord server. The easiest way is just go to aflcrowcast.com, click on live chat. You'll see the Discord chat window there. You don't even have to make an account. Just follow the directions there and you'll be straight in. Who have we got in chat tonight? We got J-Mac, we got Labs, we got Tracy joining us, Razor Ray all the way from the US.
Yep.
Fantastic, and I'm sure Vardy Magic will be along. Is he already there? I can't see him.
Already here.
Already there as well. Fantastic. Yep. There he is.
Oh, we got some quality out there, mate. Some real quality.
Yeah, well, you know what it's like, mate. They keep us informed. When we steer off the straight and narrow, they get us back on pretty quick. So, very good.
Well, they get it right, then we just correct what they said.
Mate, so, we've even got someone joining us from Twitch tonight, Sage Sloth. Thanks for joining us. So, we go to all corners of the globe and all platforms just about available. And I don't know whether he's listening tonight, but a shout out to our good friend American Crow over there in Cleveland. Razor, obviously, in the US as well. But hopefully American Crow's going okay. It's terrible over there at the moment. It's sad to see.
It's a bloody disgrace, actually. I mean, it started disgracefully, and then so some people took up legitimate protests, but then others were very optimistic about it, and looters and rioters and just troublemakers in general. So, and that damaged the cause, and the cause itself was very valid. It was very, very valid, and it was a disgrace what happened to kick it off, but. There's a lot wrong with America. I don't really want to get into politics tonight, but there's a lot wrong. And, they say the fish rots at the head, and I think it does in America.
Well, and that's a very good moment to segue into Adelaide Crows.
It is, isn't it?
And we may as well start with the news coming out late this week. Rob Chapman on, I think it was SEN. I think it was SEN Sports Day. Rucci and Kim Dillon's show, reiterating that he is going to actually stand down at the end of the season, making the comment that he believes that there is such a thing as staying in the position for too long. If only he'd realised that about 4 or 5 years ago.
Well, it has been a little bit late. And while I think he really should have gone a fair while back, and is part of the culture problem that the club has had, because we still have little hiccups along the line, and we know who the constants are, and he's one of them. I have certain concerns though about the replacement of him. I mean, I would rather have, for example, Chapman, and I do personally know one of the guys that he referred to as one of the likely candidates, and I won't say any names, but I've been on a board with him, and I had to rate him out of 10. Well, he owes us something. He's not that good, and I would rather have Chappie there because at least I know that Chappie can. While he's got the personality, well, I won't say what he's got, but there are certain things he does well. There's a lot of things he does very poorly, but there are certain things he does well.
Yeah.
And I think one of the potential replacements wouldn't even match up to that. So, and another name that's been mentioned as a potential replacement, and although he's only been at the club for 5 minutes, is Grant Kelly, because he's actually made a good impression when he's come on air. He doesn't talk bullshit. He actually tells it straight, and that's something that the club hasn't done for a long, long time.
Yeah. Do you think, Tracy mentions on the chat, and I have a sneaking suspicion it's paving the way for Mark Rasciuto. Do you think that might be on the cards, Mac?
I think it's very much on the cards, actually. Very much on the card. But I don't know whether it's necessarily the right thing for the club.
No.
Mark, there's no doubt about Mark Rasciuto. He honestly does everything he does thinking he's doing the best for the club.
Oh, no doubt.
But, when he's proved by, say, his appointment of Brett Burton, for example, that while he believes he's doing the best for the club, it isn't always the best for the club. And when you're the number one honcho, which he would be if he was the chair, well, you wouldn't want too many Brett Burton decisions, otherwise it'd be chaos.
Well, and the problem I see with Roo is that he's very much of the Tex Walker mould. It's very much you're with me or against me, and we've seen that with a few of the comments that he's come out with in the past, couple of years when the club's been under the pump, with the whole go support another club and all that. And I really get the impression with Roo that he's not a collaborative type. That he will, have a strong view, and it's a view that he'll push, and he won't necessarily bring people along with him. And I think one of the biggest qualities of a strong leader is that you can bring your organisation with you. You don't rule with an iron fist. You don't call in the bloody paratroopers to break up the crowd. You try and engage the crowd and bring everyone along for the ride. And I think Roo's done a lot of good things for the club, particularly early on in his tenure. And look, to be fair, Rob Chapman's done some reasonable things for the club too. I mean, I don't think any of us should forget how he carried himself and presented the club through the Phil Walsh tragedy. I thought Rob did a very good job during that time. And proved that he is a decent human being, which I don't think anyone doubts that he's not a decent human being. But
no doubt
as a club administrator, I think in the past couple of years he's shown himself, to be honest with you, to be a little bit out of his depth, and probably lacking a little bit in the ability to make hard decisions at the expense of people who he may be friends with, or like colleagues. The Adelaide Footy Club doesn't seem to have, up until the end of last year, have had the ability to break ties with long-held colleagues like Brett Burton, etc. Not able to make the hard choices, the hard decisions, and that's given rise to comments of boys club and all that sort of stuff. Do you think that's a fair representation, Mac?
Yeah, I think it is. But I'd say, when it comes to business negotiations, I think the guy's been great. No doubt about that. And I think he's done a very good job in that particular aspect of it. But that's only one aspect of it. The club has got an identity, and it's got a culture, and it's got a public face. And then I think that's where the club's been totally lacking. Now, he's the chair, and the people that he's appointed to run the club, up until now, they've lacked in that area as well, and that's where there's been a breakdown, I believe, between the club with its supporters and it's just been given ammo galore to the Victorian media, who just just kicking shit out of Adelaide is that's their weekly sport, And unfortunately, because of the way that we have been, I think that we have given that opportunity to them with some ridiculous decisions. And it does come back to what you said, is that while Chappie has been a hard man in his life and all the rest of it, but he hasn't, once these people have been entrenched, he doesn't seem to want to get rid of them, or he doesn't recognise they're no good. So Yeah, I think he's done. He's run his race.
Yeah, it's one thing to back your staff in and back your club in, but you've also got to be able to recognise the moment when the individual doesn't deserve your support any longer. And I think that's where the club has erred. But look, let's not be sour grapes about it. Chapman's been a long-serving chairman, done a lot of good things, some bad things, and I think the wisest thing he's ever said is that it's time for him to go. So watch this space. It's going to be very interesting to see.
Yeah, certainly wouldn't bag him overall because he's at times had to donate, and he is donating up to 60 hours a week, and that's unpaid money. He doesn't get a bloody cent for it, and here he is copying criticism by people like us, and rightly so. But and he gets nothing for that, so it's not a great position to be in. Not a great position to be in, and I think he's done us a lot of good things. He's probably lacked in doing some other things, and I wish him well in whatever he's going to do.
Well, I've mentioned on this show a few times that I have a previous connection with him from employment years ago, and my impression was always that he wasn't a football person. He wasn't really interested in football. So it always surprised me that he was involved in the Adelaide Footy Club, and I've got no doubt that it's related to his tenure with Westpac and our previous financial arrangement with Westpac, and he was probably installed by the bank was probably part of the conditions of their extending finance for us to build that facility down at Footy Park, that he'd be involved, overseeing the risk, I guess. Yes. But I'm surprised that he lasted beyond that. Anyway, look, let's not flog a dead horse. Thanks, Rob, for all your service, and we look forward to hearing the announcement in due course about his replacement.
Yep, and it'd be very interesting to see who that is, and as we said, Mark Prosciutto's probably one of the leading candidates, and we personally are not endorsing that. But if he is, well, then we'll back him and back him for what he does, and but also criticise if he does it wrong. So that's the way we act.
Yeah. Now.
Another topic I was going to raise, Fiend, and you're probably going to raise the same one as the Andrew McLeod situation.
Well, that's exactly where I was going next, because again, it speaks to the culture of the club, and for those people who haven't heard Macca's comments on, or Bungie's comments on his podcast with Brett Maher, he did say during that podcast that he felt uncomfortable at the club. That he didn't necessarily feel welcome around the change rooms and around the club, and look, when I was told, I didn't hear firsthand the podcast initially, and Vadi Magic actually drew my attention to it, and I listened to the comments, and I must admit, I was very surprised, Macca. Very surprised to hear that from probably the greatest player to have pulled on a Crows Guernsey.
Well, initially, I was quite startled to read that because he was also working part-time down the Crows last year.
Well, he was involved in the women's program. He developed the Indigenous culture program. He's been involved in designing Guernseys. He has been involved at the club in various capacities, albeit on a part-time capacity. But I didn't take his comments in terms of his employment. I felt that he just didn't feel like he was part of the club enough to be able to walk through a dressing room or walk through the administration and feel completely at ease.
Well, yes, now I think that's obviously what he meant. But I was listening to Treadray on 5AA tonight, and much as I used to always despise him when he played for Port Adelaide, he does come up with some reasonably good points.
I don't mind Treaders, actually. You're right. I don't mind Treaders.
Yep, and he made a comment that he understands what Andrew's talking about, because he said he wouldn't feel comfortable about walking into Port Adelaide unannounced. He said if he went there in his official role as for Channel 9, he would feel comfortable. But he said just to walk in and say hi, just come here to see what's going on.
Yeah.
He said that he said he wouldn't feel comfortable about that. And when you think about it, over the years, we've probably had, I don't know how many players have played for the club, and some of you out there might know that, but it would be hundreds, wouldn't it?
And, it'd be a couple of hundred, yeah.
Yeah, you couldn't have just people wandering in and out your club just at nilly-willy. I don't think so. But having said that, I mean, Mac is one of the real legends of the club, and I would have thought that, well, I don't know whether he's gone down there and been made to feel unwelcome or whatever, because he didn't elaborate on that. He just made that particular comment.
Yeah.
But I think, well, all I'm saying is that I think there's two sides to the coin. One is, a legend like him should be made to feel welcome, and when he goes down there, but you just can't have everybody rolling in and out of a club and be running efficiently at the same time.
Well, I think there's a few elements to it. I think simplistically you can look at it and say, oh, the Crows culture's shit and all the rest of it. But I think it speaks, as you were alluding to with Tredray's comments, I think it speaks to a broader issue, I guess you'd call it, within professional sport, in that I'm sure that if I went down to Sturt and Mac, if you went down to your old club at Torrens, you'd find lots of old blokes still involved, particularly at Sturt, when Sturt were struggling a few years ago. The amount of support they got from ex-players, champions from the 70s and 80s and 90s, was extreme, and they spend a lot of time honouring and respecting their old players on their various platforms and all the rest of it. And they're true clubs, whereas what we're dealing with the Crows and other clubs, particularly the non-foundation VFL clubs, is that we're not dealing with clubs, Macca. We're not dealing with an organisation that has a club rooms, that has a tribal supporter base, that has players that grew up in the area, that played for their club and all that sort of stuff. It's not the same environment. So perhaps we're actually expecting too much for the club to embrace its past players, simply because it's the organisation is not designed to do so.
Well, it's basically a franchise, and whether they like it or not, the Port Adelaide who play in the AFL, they're a franchise.
Yes, exactly.
Because they, Port Adelaide were part of the SAFL, drained them down to nothingness and wasted all their resources, and the Sandfield desperately wanted to get rid of them and said to the AFL, "You can have them. Now you can be the owners of them." And they said, "We'll only take them when we get the Crows as well." So that was the deal. That's why, and we're both in the same boat. And we're a franchise thanks to bloody Port Adelaide. And
well, we're not a franchise thanks to Port Adelaide. We're a franchise thanks to the nature of the competition, the nature of the organisation. We are not a club, and the reason Port Adelaide are not a club is because they didn't enter the Magpies in the AFL competition or the VFL competition. They entered a new team called the Port Power, and they were going to abandon the Port Magpies in the SANFL, and it wasn't until the SANFL basically stipulated that they had to keep the Magpies in the SANFL that they remained. Otherwise, the Magpies would have died the year that Port Adelaide entered a team in the AFL. But it's the same with Fremantle. It's the same with West Coast. They're not. There's no club foundation in any of those teams. There's no.
I agree with you.
There's no recognition of the remaining 8 SANFL teams in the Crows' heritage, really, and yet it was those 8 teams that made the Crows possible. So I don't, when I look at Macca's comments and I think, all right, well, you don't feel comfortable walking through there. It almost doesn't surprise me now if I listen closely to what he's saying and the way he's saying it. I think he's talking at it from the point of view of he's not of that generation anymore, and the organisations these days, sporting organisations these days, they move on pretty quick. With the draft and all that sort of stuff, it's a fairly fluid environment, and you don't get that same situation where a team might play together by and large for 10 years with minimal personnel changes. The personnel changes mean that people are in and out in 2-3 years in many cases, and there's probably not enough time to build that club base that players would stick to. Do you know what I mean?
Well, 100% agree with you, because it hasn't got that history of a long, like hundreds of years, or not hundreds, but a very long history of being a
Port Adelaide 560 years or whatever it is now.
Oh, that was BC.
Yeah.
But they've been around forever. I think Jesus played them as well.
He was on the bench.
Oh, sorry. I always get him and Moses mixed up.
Let's not do religious jokes. We'll lose half our followers.
Yeah, sorry that, bloke. I couldn't resist it. Yeah. But no, I'm on your side there here, Fiend. I think that it's sad to hear Macca say that, but I think it's a recognition of what AFL football is about. And I would say that if you go to most of the Victorian clubs, you might get one or two legends be able to drop in there, but they wouldn't want people just dropping in and out all the time. They do have, if you like, social club rooms where you can have a drink and all that sort of stuff. And yes. I think that's what's lacking here in this case. If we had that situation, and some of the boys in the chat have already mentioned that, if we had the club rooms that we were, I think, would have been heading forward. If we'd got there into North Adelaide, we would have probably taken over the pub over in the corner, or one of those there, and we would have had that situation where it would have been associated with the Adelaide Football Club, and it would have been easy for Macca to drop in there, and he could have mixed with some of the past players there, et cetera, in a social setting. But when the clubs, as the Adelaide Football Club is at the moment, it's a dead set business, and it doesn't give that opportunity.
No, that's very true, Mac. And, I think one of the things that the club has always focused on in the argument for providing a space for supporters or a club base is that they don't feel that it's necessary, that it's not financially viable. But I don't know whether they've actually considered what past players, particularly local players, and there's another point too, a lot of past players are not South Australian, but I wonder whether they've given much consideration to providing a space for past players, and whether the club room kind of setup would have been a facility for past players to enjoy as well as supporters. I read a few comments on Big Footy this afternoon saying that, during the early years of the Crows, one of the most fun elements of that was going to the shed afterwards, and there'd be players mingling with the crowd, after every game. But
that was the point I was to make. That particular point, Fane, is that since we've moved to Adelaide Oval and there is no shed, there is no heart. And by heart I mean the feeling part of being involved with the football club. And that's what the shed provided, and that would have been a situation again for Macca. But if we had a permanent fixture, then he could drop in at any time into that, and probably find some of his old teammates hanging around like barflies having a drink or two. So I think it's circumstances that make it what it is, and it's nothing prejudicial against Macca. It's just the way it is.
Yeah. Look, the one thing that I will say though is that might be true for a 50 gamer that ended his career somewhere else, or someone like a Jack Gunston, for example, who's started his career at the Crows, but predominantly played somewhere else. But we're talking about a 300+ game champion of the club.
And you argue with Tim O'Roo, who's the best player ever for the club.
That's right. And when you walk into the club, you should see Andrew McLeod, among a couple of other club legends, emblazoned all over the walls of that place. And yet, who have we got? When you walk in down at West Lakes, who do you see? And no disrespect to this bloke, Nathan Van Berlo. Nathan Van Berlo is plastered all over the walls. We've got what about Mark Bickley, our first premiership captain? What about Mark Rasciuto? What about Darren Jarman? What about Tyson Edwards, Simon Goodwin, Andrew McLeod, Benny Hart? Those blokes who are Tony Modra. Those blokes who are club legends. Those blokes that died in the wool. Not in most cases. One club pride mods wasn't quite, but there should be a special place for those people, and when those people walk into the club, the culture of the place should be that every person that works there respects the fact that here is a bloke who is integral to your employment at this football club. If it wasn't for this bloke walking in who played 300 and something games and won 2 Norm Smiths, you wouldn't have a job. So there comes a point at the club, culturally, where those blokes should feel that they can walk tall. Andrew McLeod should own the Adelaide Football Club when he walks in there. He shouldn't really feel uncomfortable. Do you understand do you get the difference?
Yeah, I do. You're really saying that there are 2 really levels of players, and there's some that are absolute legends of the club, and that they should be welcomed and be seen to be welcomed.
Yeah.
And then there are others that amongst the 2, I think it was 228 that Vardy Magic said that had played for the club.
Yeah.
And there's probably only about a dozen players amongst that 228 that would probably be entitled, if you like, to do what you're talking about. And I suppose that they could probably go out their way a little bit and show some respect and pleasure to see these people, because they helped make the club what it is today, or made it better than it probably is what it is today.
Well, they're integral to the history. They're part of the fabric of the club. Like Matt said on the chat, Gary Ablett at Geelong, both junior and senior. Peter Dacos at Collingwood. Dermot Brereton at Hawthorn. Blokes that are integral to the fabric of the club. And so whilst I can understand that these organisations aren't your traditional suburban football clubs, I still think that there's a level of player who has devoted their career and given everything and been integral to our success. Those players, the people who work for the club, should applaud Andrew McLeod every time he walks in the bloody place. I know that sounds a bit over the top, but you understand what I mean.
I do, and really, just as you'd say, with some warmth in it, so that they actually do feel welcome.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see if Macca actually comes out and clarifies that, because I think to a degree he's been taken out of context, and I think to a degree, the media have only jumped on this today, by the way. His podcast was out days ago.
Somebody put it up on Twitter. Somebody put it up on Twitter yesterday.
Yeah, it was the Press Box podcast that covered it the other day, and it sort of run with from there. But it shows that poor old Brett Maher and Bungie have got a bit to go in terms of listenership, because no one's listening to their podcast.
Well, yeah, that's a bit sad, really.
Happy to give you a shout out, Macca and Marzi. Probably just work on the comedy a little bit, but it wasn't too bad a listen. But anyway, so I mean, look. Moving on from that, though, Mac, it brings us to another cultural issue with the club that I've been really strong on, and that is the manner in which the club has handled the situation around pledges and refunds.
Yeah, and I understand what you're saying, and I think that they could have done it better, probably should have done it better. Sitting in their seat, I understand where they're getting at. They're trying to survive. And look, people who pay the money in, they want to survive. So really, it's a case really that both parties want to survive. And Adelaide didn't do it as well as they should have, and I think deliberately, so that they were hoping to keep as much as possible. And I understand why they did it. It's not necessarily the best thing to do, but I do understand why they did it.
Look, I understand it commercially, Macca. Let me rephrase. I understand the motivations behind why they did what they did from a commercial perspective, but I just feel like it. And look, let's be fair here. The Crows aren't the only club to not offer a series of options publicly. Certainly no orphans. There's been a lot of AFL clubs that have been less than transparent in terms of dealing with the membership refunds, etc. But we can only talk about the Crows, and we can only talk about what's in front of us. And I just felt that I just felt it was tone deaf from the club to start off with, given the disconnect that currently probably exists between a large proportion of the supporter base and the club. And the other thing too, Macca, is at the end of the day, if the option is there, the option is there. And to make someone have to jump through hoops, well, to first of all not even make people aware, but then when it was grudgingly raised after Mark Bickley said it on 5AA,
yes,
when it was grudgingly raised, to make it so difficult for people, you got to fill out this form, then you got to wait for a call back, and you got to do this and call. I know people who've been waiting over a week for a call back, haven't got one. And given that the club is short-staffed, why the hell would they be directing people to the phones? Because they obviously haven't got the resources to deal with the influx of calls to deal with people that want to take the $60 option. I just felt overall it was very cynical of the club, Macca.
I think what they did is they tried to make it as hard as possible for people to get.
It's Foxtel Marketing 101.
Absolutely. Yeah. Which I use to my benefit, of course, to lower my fees on Foxtel.
You just keep cancelling every month, and they give you more and more.
No, people out there don't know. If you've got Foxtel and you're paying the full amount, you're crazy. What you do is you ring up and you ask for cancellations. You don't ask to speak to anybody else. You just ask to speak to cancellations.
That's right. And that's when you get through to the marketing department.
They put you through to retentions. And then you, instead of paying $139, whatever it is, I was paying $89, and the buggers put it up to $95. I wasn't too happy about that. But,
you're still paying too much.
Well, but don't want to. But it's that sort of technique, and I understand why they did it. It doesn't make them popular with people, though. I can understand that. And look, the club is trying to survive, and with, I suppose, desperate times and desperate actions. But as I said, as you quite rightly raised, it's not going to make them popular with the people who've had to jump through hoops to get their money back, who genuinely do need the money.
Yes.
I mean, I'm in the fortunate position I don't need the money, and I'm quite happy for them to have the money. But there are people out there who are bleeding, and they genuinely need the money, and that should have been made a lot easier. No doubt about that.
Well, we have a fairly senior supporter base, Macca, and it's the senior element of our population, and particularly those that perhaps aren't self-funded retirees. The Crows is their one entertainment outlet, and they scrimp and save to pay for that membership. And, during times of crisis and all the rest of it, when you've got to pay $35 for a roll of toilet paper, that hits a pensioner a lot harder than a young bloke. And I just felt that it was a point in time where the AFL as a whole, but certainly the AFC, could have shown some empathy for the people around. I just felt that the language was wrong. Stand by the club and don't. It wasn't a bloody donation.
I had no problem with the stand by the club. It was just the way that I had no problem with that. It was the difficulty they made it for genuine cases to get their money back. That was the thing that was really very sneaky on their behalf.
Yeah.
And because when you looked at the first three options, you couldn't see a fourth, but there was a fourth.
Well, no, there wasn't a fourth there wasn't a fourth on the website.
No,
there was the three pledge options, and then there was otherwise call the club, or fill out this form, fill out this online form or whatever, and we'll call you back. what was stopping them from putting another button there that said, look, if you want a full refund but you want to retain your seat, it's going to cost you $60. Click here.
I mean, that's what they should have done, but they also knew that if they put that, there'd be a lot of buttons being pressed, and then therefore they've tried to make people jump through hoops to get it back. But the sad part of that is that a lot of the people doing that, jumping through the hoops, are desperate for the dough because they haven't got it.
That's right. And here's where I'm going to lose. Here's where I'm going to lose people, Macca, and I'll probably lose you as well in this one.
Good thing we've done it before.
But there's a bigger picture here, right? Now, I can already see the people. Apologies to my Facebook listeners who are probably a little bit more moderate than I am about the club. I'm about to piss you all off. But the Adelaide Football Club is a subsidiary of the AFL. Now, the AFL operates on a model of cross-subsidisation. Correct, Macca?
Correct.
The rich pay for the poor. That's
unfortunately,
right.
Yeah.
So the Adelaide Football Club, because it's got the capacity to do so, has gone out and got finance through its lenders because it can, because of its revenue base, right? It's gone out and got lending to fund this period, whereas other clubs have gone cap in hand to the AFL.
Yep.
Correct?
Yep.
Now, when you go and pay your membership or your season ticket to the Adelaide Crows, do you honestly think that what you're actually doing is supporting your club? Honestly.
Yes.
You're not, because we subsidise other clubs. So all we're doing by getting our own funding, Macca, is that we're allowing the parent company, the AFL, to avoid having to fund. And so, in effect, what we're doing is funding other clubs. And you'd be better off going and buying a St Kilda membership than you would funding the Adelaide Football Club, because, in effect, what you're doing is you're funding the AFL. It's not standing by the club at all, because the club is funded by the AFL just the same as every other club in the AFL. It just so happens that we've got the revenue base where instead of the AFL having to go and lend money on our behalf, we can go and do it ourselves.
But hang on, the money that I pay for my membership and everybody else, it doesn't go to the AFL. It goes to the Adelaide Football Club. The only argument you can actually sustain for what you're saying is that because we have more money than the Povs like down at Port Adelaide, for example, we aren't taking a bigger share out of the money that comes in from the TV rights, etc.
Everything is equalised, Macca. Everything is equalised. So
yes, and
when you look at let me try and I'm probably not explaining myself properly. Well, you look at the revenue streams of the AFL, right? And by and large, it's broadcast rights, and then it's licensing fees and all that sort of crap, right? But you have to include in the revenue streams for the AFL, you have to include the revenue streams of the club, all the clubs, because that forms the total basket, right? Now, some clubs are rich enough that they can be self-sustaining. West Coast, Collingwood, us to a large extent, Richmond, we have enough of a revenue stream to be self-sustaining, which then allows the AFL to divert money to the clubs that aren't self-sustaining. So it doesn't matter where the revenue is coming from. In the end of the day, one way or another, whether it be literally or figuratively, it's all going into the AFL bucket, and the AFL dishes it out. In our circumstance, it just means that rather than having to go to the AFL for money, we lend for ourselves. But at the end of the day, it's still cross-subsidising other clubs.
Well, you are right in that sense of the way you put it there. The problem I think there is there's not what we're doing. The problem is what the AFL is doing, because if you run a good business, you don't have all these parasites hanging off you. I mean, I could start a whole session, which I won't now, but with COVID, I think the AFL is missing a marvellous opportunity to rationalise the competition and to get rid of
absolutely.
all these deadbeat clubs that are hanging off them. And so it doesn't have to do this equalisation. I mean, the amount of money they pour into GWS, Gold Coast, but also some into GWS. St Kilda, just pork barrelling away there all the time. A good organisation would sit down and say, well, we're not going to do this. We're going to actually get rid of or combine clubs or whatever and balance that up against what the TV income rights would be. And, I've always been in favour of getting it back to 14 clubs and playing each other once at home and once away, which is 26-game minor round. Throw in an extra final so that you can actually scramble to get into the 8th spot into the competition and for the finals. And you'll find you won't be that many games short of what it currently is, and you'll have almost the same amount of money for the TV rights, but it's only going to profitable clubs.
Yeah, no, look, I get all of that, Mac. But do you see the contradiction in what you're saying, what you're proposing, and what you said to me earlier about supporting the club? Because by supporting the club,
indirectly, I'm doing.
No, hang on a minute. By supporting, I am not bagging anyone for having passion about their football club. We have passion about the Adelaide Crows. Everyone who listens here and everyone else who supports the Adelaide Crows has passion for the club. I'm not bagging people. I'm trying to put it in real terms. And what I'm saying to you is that by donating your 2020 membership to the club, essentially you are facilitating the AFL to avoid rationalisation of clubs or teams in the competition. Because if everyone said, no, stuff you, Adelaide and Collingwood and Hawthorn and every other club, we want our money back because you haven't given us a product, then the AFL would have no choice but to rationalise. But because they pull on the heartstrings and the whole, support your club and all that sort of crap, they are able to sustain the very teams, Macca, that you want to get rid of. And therein lies the contradiction in what you're saying.
That's one of the best arguments you've ever put forward, Phil. That actually made sense.
It's true. Look, people, we all love the tribal nature of football, and we all buy into the club environment and the club atmosphere and all the rest of it. And I know I certainly do, because I grew up in an era where that was what football was all about.
Same here.
But the marketing rhetoric of today by the AFL and its associated clubs plays on that romantic notion, but that romantic notion is no longer reality. So by people pledging to their clubs and donating to their clubs, they're actually facilitating the AFL and keeping the status quo, rather than doing what you rightly say they should do, Macca, which is to rationalise teams in Victoria. So exactly. A great opportunity was missed, but how complicit was the AFL supporter base in making that happen?
Well, I don't know whether it's been missed yet, because they've guaranteed that there'll be 18 teams up to the end of this year. They haven't guaranteed it beyond that. So technically, there's the opportunity there to do what we're talking about. Whether they've got the balls to do it, well, that's another thing. Totally another thing. But
sorry, Matt. I saved myself $400, Matt, by that very logic. So maybe I'm just trying to, justify my own actions.
Well, I can see that you actually put up a very good argument there, Fian, and technically you are right. And that if people had have not paid and said, let the club keep their membership fees, then you are right. They would have been forced to rationalise and get rid of these clubs I'd like to piss off. But no.
Look, but as I said though, Matt, I don't bag anyone for having passion for their club. I really don't. It annoys me the spin and the hype and the double speak of these big professional organisations that, like I said, play on the heartstrings and the emotions of the average supporter who just wants to go to the footy and support their bloody club, and it's such a contrived competition now with the draft and the caps and the soft cap and the bloody, the equalisation across the board. It makes it so difficult, when all we really want is what we've always had, and that is just to go and support our bloody team. And, it really makes me nostalgic for the old days, Macca. But anyway, we shouldn't dwell on that because we've got to make the best of what we got.
Yeah, just take this one step further, and the money pool situation. The AFL are talking about that there's going to be cuts in lists and also cuts in players' payments.
Yeah.
And I was reading an article which is very interesting where the March, who's I think he's the head of the AFL Players Association.
Yep.
And then basically they've got three revenue streams. They get a percentage, 28% of the forecast amount of revenue.
Yep.
They get 28% of any excess of the forecast revenue.
Yep.
They get 28% of the club's revenue, and they wanted 28% of the club's excess revenue.
Yeah.
But they only got 11.2% apparently. And in exchange for that, there was a clause put in that they wouldn't suffer any fallback in their salary.
Yeah.
In their salary payments. And that, he's saying, well, we may be forced to be a bit realistic about it, but they're saying that really the AFL hasn't got any right to make us take any cuts at all.
Well, there's a couple of points I'd make about that one, Macca. First of all, just dovetailing from my previous point to this one, there's a reason why the clubs buy into all this equalisation crap, and that is because of the draft essentially being anti-competitive and would probably fall over at the first court challenge. So,
of course it would.
So at the end of the day, all the clubs are complicit because they know that to have a healthy competition, they've got to essentially agree to a rule that wouldn't stand up in a court. The knock-on effect of that, Macca, and I think the Players Association has cottoned onto this, it gives them a lot of leverage. Gives them a lot of leverage. And I would love to place a bet for the amount of times that the Players Association has lent on the AFL during negotiations by subtly making the point around the draft not being able to stand up in a court when it comes to restraint of trade.
Which it wouldn't.
So I think what you see with the Players Association wielding an unseemly amount of power, a disproportionate amount of power, you would think. I think it rests a lot to do with the manner in which the whole competition operates. Because let's face it, if you don't have the draft, the whole competition, the whole premise of the competition, the way it's funded, the way it's structured, everything falls over. The draft is the centre point of the whole competition, the draft and the salary cap.
Which is what I was leading to.
That's
because
right.
Because there's only a certain pool amount of money.
Exactly.
And if the players are going to hold fast and say we will only go take a certain percentage because it appears that they've got the strong hand here rather than the AFL, and at the same time the AFL is talking about cutting lists back to 35, etc.
Yeah.
What's going to happen with the draft, for God's sake? Because, I mean, you take Gold Coast, they've got 51 players at the moment.
Wow.
If they've got to cut back to 35, they've got to get rid of 16 plus players to be able to take in the draft as well.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, the 35 figure that's come up and it's been thrown out there, and I'm sure it won't end up at 35 because it's not realistic enough.
No,
because
no.
I mean, you got.
I could see 38.
You're going to be tossing out decent footballers. Now, they were talking about one of the negotiation points the AFL Players Association might use is that bringing back free agency back to 6 years instead of 8. But, as the many persons pointed out, players are just starting to hit their prime. If you take Dangerfield, I can't remember how many years we had Dangerfield, but we probably had him for 6.
Well, we had him for 1 year before a Brownlow medal, Macca.
Yeah, I mean,
so that shows you how much in his prime he was.
Well, he's good. He's really consistent. Good football has come since in those latter years.
Yeah,
and so it's going to destroy the whole nature of the game, in my opinion. So that's why they have the AFL are only going to have a certain amount of money, and
what do you think? Sorry, go on, mate.
I was just going to say, the more the existing players take, I don't know how the thing's going to work.
Well, why do you think it is that every time the Players Association negotiate for terms, the bargaining chip is more flexibility? So it's either more money or more flexibility. And that's what makes me believe that they use the draft and the restraint of trade issues around the draft as a bargaining chip, because otherwise, why would they be looking for more flexibility? So obviously what they're saying is, well, you chip a little bit out of this inflexible draft system for us, and we'll take a bit of a hit in the pocket. But if you don't, we want more money. That's what it all boils down to. And at some stage, like you rightly say, Macca, the money's going to run out. Because the other element, which is completely counterintuitive as far as I'm concerned, is that not only do we have a salary cap, but clubs are forced to pay 95% of it. So there's no capacity for a club to manage its finances correctly by saying, look, we're going to have to go through a couple of years where maybe we're only going to have to pay 90 or 88% of our TPP because we literally don't have the money. Which then brings us back down to who's actually paying the players' salaries, and it's not the clubs. It's not the clubs. It's the AFL, because again, it's all equalised, Macca. The clubs manage the TPP in terms of this is the rules around how you got to build up a squad, but it's got nothing to do with money, because the AFL are basically saying we're equalising money, so we're giving all you clubs the same amount of money essentially, and we're telling you got to spend most of it. Like, you can't bank it, you can't save it, you can't defer it. Well, you can defer it a little bit now, but you know what I mean. So it just points to the fact that the players know what leverage they have, and they know that it's the AFL paying them, not the clubs. It's the AFL that's paying them. And so they use that in any negotiations. And I can't see lists going down under 38 because the Players Association will not allow it.
Well, I'm sure you're right, and it just shows. But it's you can start if you start with the point the AFL is going to have reduced income, drastically reduced income, and apparently it's trying to make that reduced income as little as possible by shaving some off for the next 2 years. But overall, it's going to mean that the annual amount for over this year and the next 2 years is shaved down maybe by 20%.
I think,
which means there is less to play players, which means that they do have to take a cut, because you've also got the AFLW to sponsor as well, which is not
it's not
an overt moneymaker. No,
it's not self-funding yet.
And and if it came back to a choice between keeping Gold Coast or running AFLW, I'd rather run AFLW because it's a growing beast. It's something that's got real momentum, and it's going to end up very, very. You've got every girl just about in Australia wanting to play AFL footy now, and it will end up as a very big thing. So it's got a future, and it'll probably get to the stage where it'll be able to pay for itself. But I can never see the Gold Coast paying for itself.
No.
So,
look, Macca, AFLW is growing so much that even my daughter, God bless her, who never touched a footy in her life, I found out the other day that she's going to start playing footy. It's like, wow, if football can get you, it can get anyone, because, gee whiz, it was just about knocked me over when I got told that. But look, there's only a finite amount of money, and at the moment, it's a balancing act that we can obviously see with the AFL in terms of either the amount of teams or the amount of players in the system. And
that's why for me it's teams. I mean, if you reduce the parasites,
I agree with you.
System, you can actually then keep a balanced. You have an improved competition because you can play home and away and on an equal basis. You can actually have an equal system.
Yeah, I agree with you.
And you get rid of the parasites, and you can actually keep your full list. You can actually sponsor the females, etc., the women to keep their competition, and which is, as I said, it's going to grow into something big.
Yeah.
And but who's going to
win? Who's going to win, Macca? Is the Players Association going to win, or is the AFL going to win? Who's going to win that battle?
If I go by the size of the testicles the AFL has shown so far, the players will. But common sense says that the AFL should really just they should really just stand firm and just do the right thing. But I don't think they will. I think the players will, and it's going to be quite chaotic, I think.
Yeah, no, look, it's... the one thing about this whole situation is that it's made professional sport need to be a lot leaner. We've seen it with Formula One, and they were already doing it anyway. But I think this, hastened that situation where they've just had to trim back on the amount of spending that was occurring in that sport. And I think, look, I'm hopeful that we will see some rationalisation. I think the only people that you would get to disagree with you, Macca, with regards to culling teams are the people that supported those teams, and I can understand why they would, because it's their club, and we're talking about Victorian clubs, and they still do have that tribal following, because it was born out of that tribal league. So they're following clubs that have been around for anything up to 100 years. But I think most people, and most fair-minded Victorian people, would agree that some rationalisation in Victoria is required, and I just can't see it happening.
Even somebody like Caro is actually saying the same thing.
With Caro, Jeff Kennett, there's been quite a few people, and I think it's starting to get some legs. But Jesus, it's a massive hill to climb for the AFL to get through that sort of culling of people's sporting lives for the sake of the competition. I don't know whether Gill's got the kahunas. It might have to be his the bloke that takes over from Gill at the end of his tenure, because I don't know whether Gill's got the bloody nuts for it, mate.
That's what I was really getting at. I mean, to me, this is just the perfect year to do it, because you've got every reason to do it. Every reason.
Yeah, definitely.
And common sense, logic, everything says that it should be done. Yeah. And, you cut off the parasites and you actually get a healthy competition going. And, in the end, I think they probably would be improved in terms of the amount of advertising they would get, because you would have stronger teams, better quality matches, stronger clubs, etc. So, that's just my view.
A couple of the comments I've heard on social media since the lockdown, and they've been playing a lot of the old school games on Fox and KO and all the rest of it, is how much more enjoyable the footy of the 90s is to watch. And maybe we just need fewer players on the field, fewer players in a squad, fewer teams in the competition, so we can get back to a bit more quality and a bit more openness in the game, and get back to the true essence of Australian rules football, which is hard one-on-one contests and a war of attrition. Because at the moment we're just watching a version of soccer and basketball and every other bloody field sport.
Well, it was interesting. Was it Brodie Smith who said that he likes the reduced amount of people in the game, like in terms of coaches, having only one voice to listen to instead of 10?
Yeah, there's been a few players say that. Seedsman came out, he's been running a few sessions, and he reckons it's made him more focused. Look, there's no doubt that AFL land has become bloated with, consultants and coaches and all the rest of it, so it probably is a bit of a rationalisation it needed to have. But as you say, Mac, I think it needs to go further, and it'll be very interesting to see how the AFL navigates the next couple of years, because it's going to be very lean. Because the biggest challenge, I think, that they're going to have revenue wise is finding enough people or finding enough corporations who want to sponsor.
Exactly, and they've always been bragging about the growth of the AFL and how much more revenue it's raised. And to me, I always felt it was like the ASX, the stock exchange.
Yeah.
That the share market keeps rising, and then it goes bang. And in this case, it was COVID that was the trigger for the bang. But it's not unlike the stock exchange, and it takes a long, long time to recover.
Yeah, well, bubbles always burst, don't they?
Yep, they burst every time.
Yeah,
and the way the AFL was getting all this money and handing it around everywhere, right, left, and centre, and in some cases worthy causes, in some cases just tossing it down the toilet, like Gold Coast, for example. The Gold Coast has taken 600 million out of the monies that the AFL have got. 600 million is a huge amount of money just to throw down the toilet.
Now, Macca, we've just had a request, so just one moment, please. We did put a question on Twitter, and that was just some canned applause that I just ran for the benefit of listeners, because we saw the NRL come out during the week, or last weekend, and I'm just looking up our poll results on Twitter, but they had the canned crowd, Macca. What do you think of that?
Well, to be honest, I didn't even bother to watch the NFL and the NRL, so I can't comment. For those who, I don't know, I'm leaving it open to those that did. I think it's better to have it than not, because that round that we saw in round one, that was very strange when you were hearing the players talking.
Keep going, mate.
Well, what are your thoughts, mate?
I think it's bloody ridiculous. I think it's like, I likened it on Twitter to a laugh track in a sitcom. If you have to watch a bloody TV show and rely on the laugh track to tell you when to laugh, that's the equivalent of the NRL telling you when you need to be happy or sad. I mean, you can watch a game and see a bloke fall over a line and know it's a try, and if it's your team, you'd be happy about it. Why do you need artificial bloody yelling in the background to make you feel better about yourself? I don't know. That's just my opinion.
Well, I think the whole idea is to put atmosphere into it, because I did think it was rather sterile watching the game. Admittedly, I did concentrate totally on the game and not distracted, but you do miss the crowd yelling out "ball" and all that sort of crap.
Yeah, but come on, Mako. Well, you're not watching a bloody science fiction show. You're watching a live event, for goodness sake. If there's no crowd there, there's no bloody crowd there.
Well, I guess if I was 100% honest, I don't really care one way or the other. If I'll watch the football and I'll absorb the footy and I'll be critical of this and I'll be appreciative of that, and I probably won't even take any notice whether there's a crowd or whatever. I just want to see the footy.
Yeah, no, so I agree.
I really don't have a viewpoint on it. So if they put it there, so be it, and if they don't put it there, so be it.
Well, our Twitter users don't have a view on it either. We got good response in because I only put it up a couple of hours ago. We got 30 odd votes, and it came in at 50-50.
Yeah, well,
so there was no
definitive
answer. No definitive answer on the laugh track for the footy. No. I think it's been
cardboard cutouts. I'll draw the line at cardboard cutouts.
What's that going on about? Oh, it's serious.
Well, it's been done, cardboard cutouts. But no, if they want to put that up, they can do it.
$22 they charge somebody to have a cardboard cutout of their face or whoever the hell they... $22. What amazes me the most is that people had enough ready cash to think, oh, that's a good way to spend $20. I'm just going to have a cardboard cutout at the rugby league. What the hell?
A little bit of conceit out there, I think, paying that. No, God. I certainly wouldn't do that.
I don't know. I mean, look, there's enough technology today that if they really wanted to be bloody progressive about it. They could superimpose a crowd there. Well, you know, they've got all the shots from past games and all the rest of it. They could animate and superimpose a crowd there. They don't have to put bloody cardboard cutouts there, or like the Crows did the other day, and like in round 1, and put jumpers over the seats behind the goals and that sort of stuff. Just a bit ridiculous.
Well, that's been done by other clubs around the world. That's what all the various things that other people do, and it does come back to a matter of opinion whether you like those things or not. To me, you know, footy's the thing. I love watching the footy, and I love watching the individuals. I love watching what the team's doing, etc. And but I did miss the atmosphere of the crowd. I did miss it. Well, they'll probably put some canned noise up this week.
I think they will because Gil liked it. I'd like to see them put some canned correct decisions on there. So, you know, when it is holding the ball, it is actually holding the ball. If they could work out a way that they could actually manipulate the game to make every decision correct, that'd be great.
That'll never happen.
And Matt makes a really good point. Just can the whole fucking competition and let's all just watch Fiend play AFL Evolution. I got to say, Matt, that after about round 3 of that thing, I got sick of the game because it was too glitchy, and it's a real shame. But I couldn't play it anymore. It was just making me bloody throw my controller at the thing. So I might get a second wind. I don't know. I think there might have been a couple of updates and patches and all the rest of it, but it was getting so glitchy that I just couldn't cope any longer.
Could I actually suggest perhaps you were losing as well?
No. We were 3-0, Mac. We were going well.
Okay. So you're not talking about it from that point of view.
No. It was the actual game itself. It was a low budget game, and it had a lot of glitches in it, and it just became a bit hard to take. So I got a bit jack of it. But I might revisit it. We might do a bit of a State of Origin or something at some point. I don't know. We'll see how we go.
Well, next week, mate, we're actually going to be talking about an actual game that we are to play, and
we are.
You know, it's getting a little bit exciting to think that footy's coming back. At one stage, I got to the stage when after so many weeks, I thought, bugger it, I hope they don't bring it back. And I don't know whether you ever got into that thought process at all.
I must admit, I'm a bit each way on this season. I think that's probably fed into by the fact that we know that the Crows aren't going to have a terribly successful season, but even that's a bit of a double-edged sword because I'm really looking forward to some of the young kids playing. And you know, I was glad to hear Nick's come out during the week and say that he wants to give Chase minutes in the middle and stuff like that. That I'm really looking forward to seeing the development of the squad. In terms of the competition itself, really to me, I think they should rename this year the COVID Cup. It's not an AFL premiership, and I don't know how enthusiastic I will get about the overall competition. I'm really enthusiastic about watching our squad develop under a new coach, and you know, all that sort of stuff, and maybe a bit of a transition of some of the senior players. But the competition itself, I don't know, Mac. I'm struggling a bit, to be honest.
Well, I did get to the stage after a certain number of weeks. I thought, I just hope they can it because you know, it's just gone too long, and it's going to be a bit of a farce anyhow by the time they bring it back. I guess now it is starting to come back. I'm starting to get a little tingle coming back, thinking maybe it will be all right. But I know that we're not going to set the world on fire with the Crows. I was just looking at our first 5 games, and you know, we could easily be, well, we've got Gold Coast and Freo, so only hopes of getting a win, I think, out of those games.
Yeah.
But it's not impossible. We could be 0-5 at the end of 5 games.
Yeah. No, look, you know, obviously we'll cover the lead up to round 1 next Tuesday, but you know, it looks like pretty much all hands on deck in terms of injuries.
No, the only one is what's his name? He always gets bloody injured.
McPherson.
No, not apart from him. He goes in. He's hard nugget little bugger.
McHenry.
No, not McHenry. Go on.
Oh, who are you talking about?
Oh, somebody out there will know. He was pretty regular in our side.
Yeah, but you said regular in our side and a hard unit. I don't know who that is.
You reckon that's contradictory?
Oh, I don't know. Stengel's obviously out.
I know. Oh, it'll come back to me later. But,
You're not talking about Murphy.
No, not Murphy. Knight.
Oh, yeah. No, he wasn't. He's still out with his Achilles, but yeah. Now look, it'll be interesting to see how they match up. But we'll talk more about that next week. Mate, we've filled up an hour and a bit. You know.
Well, I said we could keep talking forever, really.
Yeah.
But just when we do just select our side next week, we put, for example, we put Smith on the ball, and we had Miller on the back lines. And I know Miller likes at the back lines, but we need Miller as pace out of the centre. Smith he had 7 touches or something. He didn't really cut it as a midfielder. I mean, they really need to swap those positions for a start.
Well,
and
you're jumping the gun.
I'm jumping the gun.
Jumping the gun, mate.
Yeah. I just hope the side we pick is got the players in the right spot and got a little bit of speed and got a few youngsters in it, so that we can actually develop this team rather than just repeat what we've been doing.
Here's hoping, mate. We've done very well. Look, a couple of things. As we mentioned a couple of weeks ago, we are winding up Tuesday Night Live, and next week is our very, very last Tuesday Night Live. So after 5 long years, Macca,
I think that's really sad, mate.
It will be no more. I'm hopeful that we'll have everyone on. I'm also hopeful that if the boys that join us on chat and in Discord in particular, if you're joining on your phones, I'm going to open up a voice channel for you blokes next week, and we might actually cross to the CrowCast shed during the broadcast next week and have a chat to some of the people that have been supporting us all this time. It'd be great to hear the voices of J-Mac and Matt and Vardy and Razor and PJ and all these people that have supported us for so long. So if you feel so inclined and you've got access to Discord on your phone, I'll make a special voice channel for you guys to hop into next week, and we might say g'day. But we'll have Pete along, we'll have Nikki and Donkey along. I'm going to try and see if we can grab Scorpus as well. It'll be a bit of a party, probably be a fairly long session. We will talk Crows, we will preview the round 2 match. But it will be a pretty special show. It doesn't obviously mean that the CrowCast is finishing. As I mentioned when we announced this a couple of weeks ago, we will be continuing on our Sunday night show, our Sunday Wrap show, which will be 7:30 on Sunday nights every weekend. Probably be slightly expanded to talk a little bit of shit apart from the actual footy. But that's where we'll be. So please make a note in your calendars to join us next week on Tuesday Night Live, because it'll be a pretty big one, and we need to say thanks, as I mention every week, to all the people that support us, all the patrons that support us on Patreon, all the people that come out and chat with us every week. It's been fantastic, hasn't it, Mac? And it will be sad next week.
Well, yeah, it is sad because they're bloody champions, these people, and I love reading what they're saying because they're a pretty clued up bunch, and they wouldn't be here otherwise. And they really come out with some good things. I actually see a lot of my lines off of them, actually.
Yeah, yeah, we know. Yeah,
but I see they put up a good idea, and I think I'll take that.
Yeah, that's right. No one will know. The trouble is, Macca, that you probably don't watch the replay on YouTube or Facebook, but I actually run the chat on the video feed so people can see what they're saying, and if you then copy it, then you're exposed as not being able to get your own material.
Yes, but they say imitation is a form of flattery, isn't it?
Yeah, let's stick with that, shall we? Look, all right, let's wind it up there, Mac. It's been great having a chat with you tonight and great chatting to everyone. Next week's our final episodes for Tuesdays, so please join us on Tuesday night. Until then, everybody, farewell and stay safe.
Yeah, see you next week.